She walked into that Carroll County courtroom wearing a beige jail uniform and a smile faint, almost knowing, like she had a secret the rest of us didn't. Sarah Grace Patrick, 17 years old, accused of murdering her own mother and stepfather in cold blood while they slept. 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during a felony. The kind of charges that make your stomach drop. But Sarah, she smiled, because she thought her family was there to save her. She thought they'd stand up, vouch for her character, tell the judge she was innocent. She thought wrong. One by one, they took the stand. And one by one, they didn't just fail to defend her, they buried her. Her aunt, her stepbrother. Voices shaking, tears falling, fear etched into every word. If she can kill her own parents, one of them said, what's stopping her from coming after us? That smile? Gone. And in that moment, Sarah Grace Patrick realized something terrifying. She was alone. Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this case gets darker with every detail. We're talking about a crime scene that'll haunt you, a digital trail that reads like a thriller, and a family so fractured that blood means nothing anymore. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this goes. And real quick, where are you watching from? Seriously, drop your location in the comments. New York? Texas? Maybe somewhere overseas? I love seeing where this community stretches across the globe, and it reminds me that stories like this, stories about trust, betrayal, and the darkest corners of the human mind, they resonate everywhere. Now, let's get into it. The 20th of February 2025. A quiet Thursday night in rural Carrollton, Georgia. A home that should have been a sanctuary became a slaughterhouse. 2 people, Kristen Brock, 41, and her husband James, 45, shot execution style in their own bed. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just 2 bodies, side by side, and a 5-year-old little girl who woke up and found them. But here's where it gets twisted. The person who called 911, the one who seemed devastated, heartbroken, desperate for answers, she's the same person now sitting in that courtroom, facing life in prison. Let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning. Picture this, the 1,500 block of Tyus Carrollton Road, rural Georgia. The kind of place where neighbors know each other's names, where the nights are quiet except for crickets and the occasional passing car. The Brock household sat tucked away from the main road, a modest home, nothing flashy, but it was theirs. A place where Kristen Brock organized charity drives for the community, where James Brock, despite waiting for a heart transplant and living with a left ventricular assist device keeping him alive, refused to let illness define him. The 20th of February 2025 started like any other Thursday. Dinner, family time, bedtime routines. But somewhere between the hours of darkness and dawn, something unspeakable happened. When the sun came up, Kristen and James Brock were dead. They were found lying side by side in their bed, both shot at close range, the kind of close that means the shooter stood right there, looked down at them, and pulled the trigger. No hesitation, no mercy. Kristen, 41 years old, a devoted mother. James, 45, a man fighting every day just to stay alive, only to have his life stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. Here's what makes it even more chilling. There was no forced entry, no shattered windows, no kicked-in doors. Just one door, sitting ajar. Like whoever did this walked in without a care in the world. Like they knew the house, like they knew the routine, like they belonged there. And then there's the alarm. James's LVAD, the device that kept his heart pumping, had an alarm. Neighbors reported hearing it the night before. A steady, mechanical beep cutting through the stillness. Investigators noted it too when they arrived, that eerie hum in the background, a reminder that James had been fighting to live right up until someone decided he shouldn't anymore. But here's the thing. No one knows for sure if that alarm was sounding during the attack or if it went off after. Either way, it's haunting. Now imagine this. A 5-year-old little girl, Kristen and James's youngest daughter. She wakes up that morning, probably calling for her mom, maybe hungry, maybe just wanting a hug. She walks into her parents' bedroom, and she finds them. I can't even begin to imagine what that does to a child. The confusion, the terror, the image burned into her mind forever. She didn't understand what she was seeing, but she knew something was horribly, horribly wrong. So she did what any scared kid would do. She called her older sister, Sarah, 17 years old, spending the night at a friend's house. The little girl was frantic, crying, begging Sarah to come home. "Something's wrong with Mom and Dad. You need to come back. You need to call someone." Sarah rushed back, and at 6:47 a.m., she dialed 911. The call was frantic, panicked, desperate. "My parents, they're not moving. There's blood. Oh my God, there's so much blood. Please, you have to send someone. Please." Dispatch kept her on the line, told her help was on the way, and within minutes, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office descended on the property, then the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, then the FBI. This wasn't just a local tragedy anymore, this was a full-scale homicide investigation. By the time the sun fully rose, the Brock home was swarming with law enforcement. Crime scene tape, forensic teams in white suits, detectives canvassing the area, knocking on doors, asking neighbors if they'd seen anything, heard anything. Cameras, evidence markers, the whole 9 yards. And standing in the middle of it all was Sarah Grace Patrick, 17, tearful, traumatized, or so it seemed. Because here's what investigators were starting to piece together. This wasn't a random break-in. This wasn't some stranger who stumbled onto the property looking for valuables. Whoever killed Kristen and James Brock knew them, knew the house, knew exactly where to find them. And that realization, that's when everything shifted. When a double homicide happens in a place like Carrollton, Georgia population barely pushing 27,000, it doesn't just shake a family. It shakes an entire community. Within hours, the Brock property transformed into something out of a crime drama. Carroll County Sheriff's deputies were first on scene, securing the perimeter, making sure no evidence got contaminated. But they knew immediately this was bigger than anything their department could handle alone. So they called in reinforcements. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation rolled in with their forensic specialists. Then came the FBI, because when you've got a double murder with no clear suspect and no obvious motive, you bring in every resource you can get. This was an all-hands-on-deck situation. Crime scene technicians spent hours combing through that bedroom. They photographed every angle, collected trace evidence, fibers, hairs, anything that didn't belong. They swabbed for gunshot residue, lifted latent prints from doorknobs, light switches, anything a hand might have touched. They analyzed blood spatter patterns to determine the shooter's position. They even brought in cadaver dogs to sweep the property, just in case there was more to this story than 2 bodies in a bed. And then there was ballistics. The bullets were recovered during autopsy. Forensic experts confirmed they came from a handgun, but here's the problem. The gun was never found. Not in the house, not on the property, not in any nearby dumpster or body of water. It was gone. And that told investigators something crucial. This wasn't a murder-suicide. Someone pulled that trigger, and then they walked out with the weapon. But physical evidence was only part of the puzzle. This was 2025, and in 2025, people leave digital breadcrumbs everywhere they go. So while techs processed the scene, another team dove into the digital world. Cell phone records, geolocation data, text messages, social media activity, surveillance footage from nearby streets and businesses. They pulled everything. The FBI brought in specialists who could track metadata, analyze messaging logs, reconstruct timelines down to the minute. Because in cases like this, your phone tells a story and sometimes that story doesn't match the one you're telling out loud. Meanwhile, detectives fanned out across the neighborhood, knocked on every door within a mile radius. Did you see anything unusual that night? Hear anything? Notice any cars that didn't belong? Most people had nothing. A few mentioned hearing a dog bark around midnight. One neighbor recalled seeing headlights on the road, but couldn't say whose. And that's when the fear set in. Because if no one saw anything, if no one heard anything, then how did this happen? How does someone walk into a home, execute 2 people in their sleep, and vanish without a trace? Carrollton isn't the kind of place where people lock their doors. It's the kind of place where you wave at your neighbor from the porch, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. But after February 20th, doors got locked, curtains stayed drawn, parents kept their kids a little closer. Sheriff spokesperson Ashley Halsey tried to calm the public. "We are committed to leaving no stone unturned," she said in a press conference. "We will find who did this." But weeks went by. Then a month, then 2, and still no arrests, no named suspects. Just a community holding its breath, wondering if a killer was still walking among them. And in the middle of all that fear and speculation, Sarah Grace Patrick was posting on TikTok. All right, if you're hooked, and I know you are, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story takes a wild turn that you won't see coming. We're about to dive into a digital rabbit hole that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about grief, social media, and the mind of a killer. And while you're at it, drop a like if you're invested in this case. It helps more people discover these stories, and honestly, cases like this need to be told. They need to be examined. They need to be understood. Quick question: what time is it where you are right now? Seriously, let me know in the comments. Are you watching this at 2 a.m. because you can't sleep? Maybe it's your lunch break? Or are you halfway across the world where it's already tomorrow? I'm curious, drop the time and your location. I love seeing this community come together from every corner of the globe. Now back to Sarah. While investigators were working around the clock, processing evidence, chasing leads, trying to piece together what happened that night, Sarah was doing something that would eventually become a key part of the case against her. She was going viral. Not for the reasons you'd expect. Not because she was demanding justice or pleading for tips. No, Sarah Grace Patrick was turning her parents' murder into content. And what she posted? It's about to get real uncomfortable. In the days following the murders, Sarah's TikTok account became a window into what looked like raw, unfiltered grief. She posted a video of herself sitting in a church pew, head bowed, hands clasped together. The caption read, "Why God? Why them?" Her face was streaked with tears. Her voice trembled. Thousands of people watched, tens of thousands. The comments poured in hearts, prayers, messages of support. "Stay strong, sweetie. We're praying for you. I can't imagine what you're going through." Another video showed a montage of family photos. Kristen smiling at a birthday party, James with his arm around Sarah. Happy moments frozen in time, now soundtracked by Sarah's shaky voiceover. "Mum and Dad, I miss you more than words can say. I don't know how to do this without you." It was heartbreaking. It was relatable. And for a while, people felt for her. A 17-year-old girl who lost both her parents in the most horrific way imaginable. Of course, she was devastated. Of course, she was reaching out for comfort online. That's what her generation does, right? They process trauma publicly. They share their pain. But then things started to get weird. By June, 4 months after the murders, Sarah wasn't just posting about her grief anymore. She was actively reaching out to true crime influencers. Big ones. The kind with hundreds of thousands, even millions of followers. She was sliding into DMs, sending messages, practically begging them to cover her parents' case. One message, later shared with law enforcement, read, "Search up Brock case. They're my parents." And out of nowhere, a random Thursday night in February, someone came in my house with me and my 5-year-old sister and shot my parents brutally, leaving them for me and my little sister to wake up to. She wasn't just asking for help. She was pitching the story, framing it, offering details. And here's the thing, some of those details, they hadn't been released to the public yet. One influencer, who goes by the name Mama Tot, a creator known for her comforting motherly presence online, received a message from Sarah that was equal parts desperate and unsettling. "Mama, I need a mama bad right now," Mama Tot later said in an interview. "At first, I thought she was just a grieving kid looking for support, but the more we talked, the more something felt off. Like she wasn't just looking for comfort, she was looking for an audience. And she wasn't the only one who felt that way." Another creator with a 6-figure following reported receiving multiple late-night messages from Sarah. Messages that didn't just ask for coverage, they offered intel, speculation about evidence, theories about motives. It was like Sarah was trying to control the narrative before it even got out. Investigators took notice, because in their world, when someone is that eager to shape the story, it raises a red flag. Why would an innocent person need to manage public perception so carefully? Why would a grieving daughter spend hours messaging strangers online instead of, I don't know, grieving? And then there's the search history. During the digital forensics phase, investigators pulled Sarah's browser data, and buried in those search logs was a query that made everyone stop cold. How to clean up a crime scene. Let that sink in. Not how to cope with trauma. Not grief counseling near me. Not even who could have killed my parents. No. How to clean up a crime scene. Now, defense attorneys would later argue that Search could have been innocent. Maybe she was curious. Maybe she was researching for a school project. Maybe it was taken out of context. But combined with everything else, the TikTok videos, the influencer outreach, the timeline inconsistencies, the geolocation data that allegedly placed her phone near the house around the time of the murders, it started to paint a very different picture. One investigator, speaking off the record, put it bluntly. We see a lot of killers try to insert themselves into the investigation. They want to know what we know. They want to steer us in the wrong direction. But this was next level. She wasn't just inserting herself, she was trying to become the face of the case, the victim and the storyteller. And that's when the tone shifted. People who had been sending Sarah prayers and support started asking questions. Wait, why is she so focused on going viral? Why does she keep talking to true crime channels instead of letting the police do their job? Does anyone else think this is strange? The sympathy was fading. And suspicion? It was growing fast. Because the more people looked at Sarah's digital footprint, the more it seemed like she wasn't mourning her parents. She was performing. The 8th of July, 2025. Nearly 5 months after Kristen and James Brock were found dead in their bed, investigators finally made their move. Sarah Grace Patrick was arrested and booked into the Carroll County Jail. She didn't run. She didn't resist. In fact, she surrendered voluntarily, accompanied by her biological father, Doniel Patrick. He held her hand as they walked in, his face a mixture of disbelief and devastation, because no parent wants to believe their child is capable of something like this. But the state of Georgia? They believed it. Sarah was charged as an adult, despite being only 17 at the time of the murders. In Georgia, when you're accused of murder, age doesn't protect you. The Superior Court has exclusive jurisdiction over cases like this, and the law is clear. Certain crimes are too serious for juvenile court. This was one of them. The charges were staggering. 2 counts of malice murder, meaning the state believed Sarah intended to kill her mother and stepfather, that she acted with what the law calls an abandoned and malignant heart. 2 counts of felony murder, meaning even if the jury didn't believe she planned it, a death occurred during the commission of another violent felony, and that's enough for a murder conviction. 2 counts of aggravated assault, using a deadly weapon with intent to cause serious harm, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, a charge that carries mandatory sentencing enhancements in Georgia. If convicted on all counts, Sarah was looking at life in prison. No parole, no second chances. Within hours of the arrest, District Attorney Alexandra Chandler held a press conference. Reporters packed the room, cameras flashing, microphones jostling for position. Chandler stood at the podium, her expression calm but resolute. "We believe the evidence makes clear," she said, her voice steady, "that this was no random intrusion. This was not a stranger who broke into the Brock home looking for valuables. This was a calculated act by someone with intimate knowledge of the victim's routine." She didn't name Sarah directly, not yet, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Chandler refused to elaborate on the digital evidence, citing the need to protect the integrity of the grand jury proceedings. But the message was clear. They had enough to charge her, and they believed they had enough to convict her. The reaction was immediate and divided. Doniel Patrick, Sarah's father, released a statement through his attorney. "My daughter is innocent. She loved her mother. She would never, could never, do something like this. We will fight these charges with everything we have." He stood by her, unwavering, a father's love refusing to accept the unthinkable. But the Brock family? They saw it differently. James's sister, Kim Bowling, spoke to local news outlets, her voice shaking with anger and grief. "We lost Kristen and James, and now we're supposed to believe the person responsible is the same girl who called them mom and dad. It's sickening." Tristan Brock, James's adult son, was even more direct. "If she did this, and I believe she did, then she deserves to spend the rest of her life behind bars. My dad didn't survive a lifetime of health struggles just to be murdered in his sleep by someone he trusted." The battle lines were drawn. Doniel Patrick on one side, the Brock family on the other, and Sarah, caught in the middle, facing charges that could end her life before it ever really began. But the real test was still to come. The bond hearing. Okay, We're about to get into the most intense part of this entire case, the bond hearing. And trust me, what happens in that courtroom is absolutely jaw-dropping. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Don't miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and turn on notifications because cases like this don't come around often, and you're going to want to see how this plays out. Also, I'm genuinely curious. What's the weather like where you are right now? Sunny? Rainy? Snowing? Are you bundled up or sweating? Drop it in the comments. I love hearing from you, guys, and it's wild to think that no matter what the weather is, no matter where you are in the world, we're all here together diving into the darkest corners of the human mind. All right, let's talk about the 11th of August 2025. The bond hearing. This is where Sarah's fate would be decided, at least temporarily. Would she be granted bond and allowed to go home while awaiting trial? Or would she stay locked up, deemed too dangerous, too much of a flight risk to be released? The courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, online followers who'd been tracking the case since day one, and of course, family members, some there to defend Sarah, others there to make sure she stayed behind bars. What happened next? It was a courtroom battle that nobody saw coming. The 11th of August 2025, Carroll County Courthouse. The hallways buzzed with energy reporters adjusting cameras, neighbors whispering theories, online followers who'd driven hours just to be there in person. This wasn't just a bond hearing, this was a spectacle, and everyone knew it. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Wooden benches filled quickly. Family members on both sides sat as far apart as the room would allow, like opposing armies before a battle. Some clutched tissues, others sat stone-faced, arms crossed, jaws clenched. And then Sarah walked in. Beige jail uniform, hands cuffed in front of her, hair pulled back, and that smile faint, almost casual, like she was walking into a family reunion instead of a courtroom where her freedom hung in the balance. She scanned the room, eyes landing on familiar faces. Her father, Doniel, sitting in the front row, tears already welling up. A few friends, her grandfather, people she thought were there to save her. She looked confident, like she believed this was all a formality, like she'd be walking out of there by the end of the day. Judge Dustin Hightower entered, and the room fell silent. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and before anyone could say a word, he leaned forward and delivered a warning that cut through the tension like a blade. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "This is not daytime court TV. This is not entertainment. This is a legal proceeding, and it will be treated with the respect and seriousness it deserves. If anyone in this courtroom cannot conduct themselves accordingly, you will be removed. Are we understood?" Heads nodded. The message was received. And then the hearing began. The defense went first. They called 6 witnesses and submitted 8 character letters, all painting Sarah as a kind, devout, misunderstood teenager who couldn't possibly be guilty of such a horrific crime. Pastor Ben Booner took the stand first. He spoke softly, his hands folded in his lap. "Sarah is a devout believer," he said. "She calls me from jail to pray. She was recently baptized. She attends church regularly. I've known her for years, and I can tell you this is not the heart of a killer." A family friend, Olivia Martinez, followed. She wiped her eyes as she spoke. "Sarah helped me study for tests. She took my calls when I was depressed. She was always there for me. Always. I don't care what anyone says, she's a good person." Then came Sarah's grandfather, Dennis Nolan. His voice was steady, almost defiant. "There is no physical evidence tying her to that gun," he said. "None. The weapon has never been found. You can't convict someone on speculation. You can't lock up a child because it's convenient." One by one, they testified. One by one, they vouched for her character. And for a moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the defense was building a case strong enough to get her out. But then the prosecution stood up, and everything changed. Kim Bowling, James Brock's sister, was the first to take the stand for the state. She walked slowly, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the witness box. Her voice cracked before she even started speaking. "I loved my brother," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He was a good man, a kind man. And Kristen, she was family. They didn't deserve what happened to them." She paused, took a shaky breath, and then looked directly at the judge. "If she can kill her own parents in such a violent manner," Kim said, her voice breaking, "then I fear for my safety. I fear for my family's safety, and I fear for that 5-year-old little girl who saw things no child should ever see." The courtroom was silent. You could hear people breathing. "I don't feel safe," Kim continued. "Not if she's out there. Not if she's free." She stepped down, barely able to hold herself together, and then Tristan Brock, James's adult son, took her place. Tristan didn't cry. He was angry. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. He looked at Sarah for a long moment before turning to the judge. "My father was my Superman," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He fought every single day just to stay alive. He had a device keeping his heart beating. He was waiting for a transplant. He was fighting. And someone took that away from him." He paused, his eyes glistening. "If she's released, she'll run. I know she will. She won't face justice, she'll disappear. And my father and Kristen, they'll never get the justice they deserve." His words hung in the air like a weight no one could lift. The defense tried to counter. They argued that Sarah had no prior criminal record, that she had strong community ties, that she wasn't a flight risk, that the evidence was circumstantial at best. But the prosecution fired back. They argued that Sarah posed a danger to witnesses, especially her 5-year-old sister, whose testimony had already been recorded in closed-door hearings. They argued that someone capable of executing 2 people in their sleep couldn't be trusted to follow the conditions of bond. They argued that the digital evidence, the timeline, the searches, the social media behavior, all of it pointed to someone who knew exactly what she was doing. And then Judge Hightower spoke. "I've listened to both sides," he said, his tone measured but firm. "I've heard testimony about the defendant's character. I've heard fears from the victim's family, and I've reviewed the charges and the evidence presented by the state." He paused. The room held its breath. "While the defendant has no prior criminal history, the nature of these charges is severe. The potential danger to witnesses, particularly a minor child, cannot be ignored. The risk of flight, given the possibility of life imprisonment, is significant." Another pause. Sarah's smile was gone now. Her face had gone pale. "Bond is denied." The gavel came down, and that's when Sarah broke. The composure she'd carried into that courtroom shattered in an instant. Her face crumpled. Her shoulders shook. She sobbed loud, uncontrollable, desperate sobs that echoed off the walls. Her father buried his face in his hands. Her grandfather stared at the floor. On the other side of the room, Kim Bowling closed her eyes and exhaled, relief washing over her. Tristan nodded once, his jaw still tight, tears finally spilling over. The courtroom was silent except for Sarah's cries. No one moved, no one spoke, because in that moment, everyone understood the same thing. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was a family destroyed, a community fractured, a tragedy with no winners, only survivors trying to make sense of the unthinkable. Sarah Grace Patrick would stay behind bars, and the question that haunted everyone in that room, did she do it, would have to wait for a jury to decide. Before we go any further, let's break down the legal side of this case, because understanding the charges is crucial to understanding what Sarah is actually facing. In Georgia, murder charges come in 2 forms, malice murder and felony murder. And yes, you can be charged with both for the same killing. Malice murder is what most people think of when they hear murder. It means the prosecution has to prove that Sarah intended to kill Kristen and James, that she acted with what the law calls malice, a forethought. Basically, she knew what she was doing, she meant to do it, and she did it with an abandoned and malignant heart. Cold, calculated, intentional. Felony murder, on the other hand, doesn't require proof of intent to kill. It just requires proof that someone died while another serious crime was being committed. In this case, that crime is aggravated assault. So even if the jury doesn't believe Sarah planned to kill her parents, if they believe she assaulted them with a deadly weapon and they died as a result, that's still murder, and it carries the same penalty, life in prison. Then there's aggravated assault 2 counts. Under Georgia law, that means using a deadly weapon with the intent to cause serious harm or to murder. A gun pointed at someone's head while they sleep. That's textbook aggravated assault. And finally, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. This charge carries mandatory sentencing enhancements. If you use a gun while committing a violent crime in Georgia, the law doesn't go easy on you, period. Now here's the kicker. Sarah was 17 when this happened. Technically a minor, but in Georgia, if you're charged with murder, your age doesn't protect you. The state's juvenile code gives superior courts exclusive jurisdiction over murder cases, meaning Sarah is automatically tried as an adult. There's no debate, no hearing to determine if she should be treated as a juvenile. The law is clear. Murder is too serious for juvenile court. So what does that mean for her? If convicted, she's facing life in prison, no possibility of parole. The same sentence an adult would get. As for the bond hearing, Georgia courts consider three main factors when deciding whether to release someone awaiting trial: flight risk, danger to the community, and potential witness intimidation. In Sarah's case, the prosecution argued all three. They said she's a flight risk because she's facing life in prison. What's stopping her from running? They said she's a danger because if she could kill her own parents, who else might she harm? And most importantly, they argued she poses a threat to witnesses, specifically her 5-year-old sister, who discovered the bodies and whose testimony could be critical at trial. Judge Hightower agreed. And that's why Sarah is still sitting in a jail cell, waiting for her day in court. The legal system doesn't care about TikTok videos or character references when the stakes are this high. It cares about evidence, risk, and justice. And right now, the scales aren't tipping in Sarah's favor. So here's where we need to pause and ask the questions that everyone's thinking but nobody can definitively answer yet. Because despite all the evidence, despite the charges, despite the bond denial, there are still massive holes in this case. Things that don't add up. Things that make you wonder if we're getting the full story. Let's start with the most obvious one. Where is the murder weapon? Kristen and James Brock were shot at close range with a handgun. Ballistics confirmed the caliber. Forensic experts analyzed the bullets recovered during autopsy. But the gun itself? Gone. Vanished. Not in the house, not on the property, not in any nearby dumpster, body of water, or wooded area that investigators searched. So where is it? If Sarah did this, what did she do with the gun? Did she hide it somewhere? Investigators haven't looked. Did she give it to someone else? Throw it in a lake, hours away? And if she didn't do it, if someone else pulled that trigger, then where did they go with it? Because that weapon is the smoking gun. Literally, whoever has it, or knows where it is, holds a key piece of this puzzle. Then there's the digital evidence. Prosecutors say it's damning. They say Sarah's phone was near the house around the time of the murders. They say her search history included how to clean up a crime scene. They say her messaging logs show communications that don't line up with her story. But here's the thing. We don't know exactly what that evidence shows. Court filings are sealed. Grand jury testimony is confidential. The defense argues there's no physical evidence tying Sarah to the crime, no fingerprints on a weapon, no gunshot residue definitively linking her to the shooting. So, how much weight does digital evidence really carry? Can geolocation data be wrong? Can search history be misinterpreted? Can metadata tell the whole story, or just part of it? These are questions a jury will have to wrestle with. And honestly, they're questions we should all be asking. Because in 2025, your phone can tell a story about you, but is it always the true story? And then there's the biggest question of all. What's the motive? Why would a 17-year-old girl kill her own mother and stepfather? What could possibly drive someone to do that? Was it anger? Resentment? Some deep-seated family conflict that nobody saw coming? Did Sarah feel trapped? Controlled? Was there abuse we don't know about? Or was it something darker, something cold and calculated, like financial gain or freedom? The prosecution hasn't publicly stated a motive yet, and that's unusual, because juries want to know why. They want it to make sense. Even in the most horrific cases, people need a reason, something that explains how a daughter could stand over her sleeping parents and pull the trigger. But what if there isn't a clear motive? What if it was impulsive? What if it was a moment of rage that spiraled out of control? Or what if, and this is the question Sarah's defense will hammer home, what if she didn't do it at all? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't have all the answers yet. We have charges, we have allegations, we have digital breadcrumbs and circumstantial evidence, but we don't have the full picture. And until that trial happens, until a jury hears every piece of evidence and deliberates on the facts, We're all left wondering the same thing. Did Sarah Grace Patrick really kill her parents? And if she did, why? Amid all the legal jargon, the courtroom drama, and the true crime speculation, it's easy to forget the most important thing. Real people died. Real lives were destroyed. And the ripple effects of that one night in February will be felt for generations. Kristen Brock was 41 years old. By all accounts, she was the kind of person who lit up a room. Neighbors remembered her as warm, welcoming, the type who organized charity drives and checked in on people just to make sure they were okay. She was a devoted mother who loved her daughters fiercely. She worked hard. She cared deeply. And she didn't deserve to die the way she did. James Brock was 45. He'd been battling health issues for years, waiting for a heart transplant, living with a device that kept his heart beating when his own body couldn't. But he didn't let that define him. Friends described him as resilient, determined, a man who refused to give up no matter how hard life got. He was a husband, a father, a stepfather, and he fought every single day just to be there for his family. Together, Kristen and James built a blended family. It wasn't always easy, blended families rarely are, but they tried. They created a home. They raised children. They loved each other. And now they're gone. Then there's the 5-year-old. The little girl who woke up that morning and found her parents dead. The one who had to call her older sister in a panic because she didn't understand what she was seeing. The one who will carry that image with her for the rest of her life. She's not just a victim, she's a witness. Her testimony has already been recorded in closed-door hearings, and it will likely play a crucial role at trial. But think about what that means for her. She's a child, she lost her parents, and now she has to relive that trauma in front of strangers, lawyers, a jury. She has to help decide whether her own sister is guilty of murder. How do you even begin to process that? And then there's the family, fractured, divided, torn apart by grief and suspicion. On one side, Doniel Patrick, Sarah's biological father, a man who refuses to believe his daughter is capable of this. A man clinging to hope, to innocence, to the belief that the justice system will prove everyone wrong. On the other side, the Brock family. James's sister, Kim, who can't sleep at night because she's terrified. James's son, Tristan, who lost his Superman and will never get him back. People who loved Kristen and James and can't fathom how someone they trusted, someone they called family, could do this to them. There's no reconciliation here, no healing, just two sides of a family that will never be whole again. This case isn't just about guilt or innocence, it's about the human cost of violence, the lives shattered, the trust broken, the love that couldn't survive the weight of tragedy. And no verdict will ever fix that. This case forces us to confront something uncomfortable about the world we live in, the collision of grief and virality. We're living in an era where tragedy doesn't just happen, it gets posted, shared, commented on, and turned into content, where someone can lose their parents and within days be creating TikTok videos about it, where true crime isn't just something you watch on TV, it's something you participate in, dissect, and debate in real time. And Sarah Grace Patrick? She exists at the center of that collision. She was a mourner, posting tearful videos, sharing family photos, expressing what looked like genuine devastation. She was a media strategist, reaching out to influencers, pitching her parents' story, trying to control the narrative before it controlled her. And she was a suspect, someone whose every post, every message, every search query would eventually be used against her in a court of law. Think about that for a second. In previous generations, grief was private. You mourned with family, with close friends, maybe at a funeral. But now, grief is public, it's performative, and the line between genuine emotion and calculated presentation has become so blurred that we can't always tell the difference. And that's dangerous, because when a case plays out on social media before it ever reaches a courtroom, public opinion becomes the first verdict. People pick sides, they analyze every detail. They decide who's guilty and who's innocent, based on vibes, on gut feelings, on how someone looks in a video, or what they said in a comment. Trial by TikTok, trial by Instagram, trial by the court of public opinion. But here's the question, is that justice, or is it just noise? Because Sarah deserves a fair trial, the Brock family deserves real answers, And that 5-year-old girl deserves a system that prioritizes truth over trends. Social media can be a powerful tool. It can generate leads, spread awareness, bring attention to cases that might otherwise be ignored. But it can also taint evidence, influence witnesses, and turn real human tragedy into entertainment. So where do we draw the line? When does coverage become exploitation? When does curiosity become obsession? These are questions we all need to ask ourselves. Because cases like this, they're not just stories, they're real lives, real pain, real consequences. And no amount of likes or shares will ever change that. So where does this case go from here? Sarah Grace Patrick is sitting in a Carroll County jail cell, waiting, and the legal machinery is grinding forward, slowly but inevitably. First up, pre-trial motions. This is where both sides fight over what evidence gets to see the light of day in front of a jury. The defense is expected to challenge the digital evidence, arguing that search warrants were improperly executed, that geolocation data is unreliable, that social media posts are being taken out of context. They'll file motions to suppress, motions in limine, motions to exclude anything that could prejudice the jury before they even hear opening statements. The prosecution, meanwhile, will fight to keep it all in. They'll argue that every text message, every browser search, every TikTok video is relevant. They'll push for witness protections, especially for that 5-year-old sister whose testimony could make or break their case. Then there's jury selection. And in a case this high profile, that's going to be a nightmare. How do you find 12 people in Carroll County, or anywhere in Georgia, for that matter, who haven't already heard about this case, who haven't seen the TikTok videos, who haven't formed an opinion based on social media speculation? Attorneys will have to dig deep during voir dire, asking potential jurors about their social media habits, their exposure to true crime content, their ability to set aside what they've heard and judge the case solely on the evidence presented in court. It's a tall order, and it could take weeks. A tentative trial date has been set for early 2026, but in cases this complex, delays are common. Motions get filed, evidence gets challenged, witnesses become unavailable. What's scheduled for January could easily slide to March, June, or beyond. But whenever it happens, the stakes couldn't be higher. If convicted, Sarah faces life in prison without the possibility of parole, her entire life over before it really began. If acquitted, she walks free. But even then, the shadow of suspicion will follow her forever, because in the court of public opinion, verdicts are rarely final. So we wait. The family waits, the community waits, and Sarah, she waits in a cell, knowing that everything, her freedom, her future, her very identity hangs in the balance. Before we wrap this up, I need you to do something for me. If this case moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you why stories like this matter, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and share this video, because these aren't just stories for entertainment. These are real lives, real tragedies, real families torn apart. And the more people who engage with these cases, the more awareness we bring to the complexities of the human mind and the justice system. So subscribe, like, and share. Help us bring these stories to light. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think happened? Do you believe Sarah Grace Patrick killed her mother and stepfather, or do you think she's innocent, caught in a nightmare she didn't create? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Guilty or innocent? I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this one. Because here's the thing, this case isn't black and white. It's not simple. It's messy, complicated, and heartbreaking from every angle. In the end, this isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's about trust, how it's built, how it's broken, and whether it can ever be repaired. It's about family, the bonds we think are unbreakable until they shatter in ways we never imagined. And it's about the limits of forgiveness, whether love can survive suspicion, whether loyalty can withstand fear, and whether justice can ever truly heal the wounds left behind. Sarah Grace Patrick walked into that courtroom with a smile, believing her family would stand by her. She thought they'd save her. She thought their love was unconditional. But when they took the stand, one by one, and spoke not of her innocence but of their fear, that smile disappeared. And in that moment, she learned a brutal truth. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who seal your fate. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.